My name is Beverly Hodgson, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Joanne Faulkner. Today is August 2nd, 2005. I'm conducting this interview as part of the Connecticut Bar Foundation James W. Cooper Fellows project, The Oral History of Women in the Legal Profession in Connecticut. The Connecticut Bar Foundation is sponsoring this project. Now, I'd like to ask first that you state your name and your date of birth and place of birth, Attorney Faulkner.
My name is Joanne Faulkner. I was born Joanne Smith in Canastota, New York in 1938.
Let's begin by talking a bit about your early days. Where did you grow up? And tell me about your parents and your siblings.
I grew up mostly in Ithaca, New York, which is the home of Cornell University, where I ended up going to law school. My father worked for what is now Agway, and my mother was a homemaker. I had two younger brothers. I went to school in Ithaca, New York, public schools, all through high school. Graduated in 1956 at the top of my class.
Were there members of the family who were lawyers?
There were no members of the family who were lawyers. I did not know what a lawyer was.
And would you describe your neighborhood and the kind of school system that you attended?
Well, the neighborhood was just a small family neighborhood, middle-class neighborhood. The public school was right down the street at the corner, so we walked every day to school, walked back for lunch, walked back to school. We were about half a mile from the Cornell campus. So Ithaca was a nice town to grow up in because we had all the culture of Cornell. We had the football, we had the museums, and we had the faculty children going to school with us all our lives. My father was a Cornell graduate. He was the first college graduate in his family, and he played football and baseball for Cornell.
Now, during high school, did you have any work experiences?
I worked just typical summer jobs, nothing that I can even remember.
And being first in your class graduating from high school, what kind of high school experience went with that?
There were about 200 people, I think, in the high school. The high school was very good. We had some faculty who were actually Cornell graduate students, and I can remember distinctly having the benefit of some of their learning in some of the English and history classes and so forth. I really don't remember much about my high school days.
Were there any particular teachers who were role models or inspirational about a future career for you?
No.
And then where did you go on to college?
I went to Nazareth College, which at that time was a women's college in Rochester, New York.
How did you choose that?
Well, I'm not sure I did. My father was quite concerned about me going away from home. I was the oldest and I was the daughter, and he wanted me to go to a women's college, and since we were Catholic, and that was the closest one around, I went there.
Did you agree with that ambition for a women's college and close to home?
Looking back, I think it was the right thing to do. Looking forward, obviously, I was concerned about it because most of my peers were going to Cornell or Harvard or Yale or Amherst or some of the other better-known large and small colleges.
Did that choice of college mean that your family was not expecting you to do something like go into the profession of law?
I think that's probably correct.
What do you think their visions were for you?
Probably the same as my mother. You grow up, you get a husband, you have a home, you're a homemaker.
And when did you attend college?
1956 to 1960. I should add that the college didn't do anything to change that attitude because at that point the college was training women either to be nurses or to be mothers. And you took an English course because you wanted to be able to read Shakespeare to your child in the crib.
So how did you hatch the ambition to be a lawyer, which seems not to have been anybody else's ambition for you?
I kind of backed into it. When I was graduating, there wasn't anything in particular I wanted to do. I was a history major, and I didn't have any particular training, so I felt I needed some training to do something or other. And somebody mentioned to me, you like to debate, you like to argue, you like to see all sides of an issue. Why don't you be a lawyer? So I decided to apply to law school.
Now, what was the reaction to that at home? It's a far cry from reading Shakespeare to the kiddies.
They are very supportive. They were very supportive, Mom and Dad. You know, they knew they had somebody in their hands that wasn't just going to get married and stay home with the kids, but that hopefully had something to contribute to society.
Now, what made them realize that you weren't going to be happy with Plan A?
Well, there wasn't any man in sight, was there? No, I think they realized that I wanted to go on and get more education than college.
And did you have any cheerleaders for that ambition?
The thing was, in college, I had so many scholarships that I was all paid for. And they don't do that nowadays. They don't do academic scholarships. And in law school, it was pretty much the same when I applied to law school. And I could live at home. I was about half a mile from the law school. So that was fine with everybody.
Which law school
Cornell.
did you attend? And did you apply to any others, or was it Cornell or nothing?
No, I applied to a couple of others, but Cornell would have been the cheapest because I could live at home.
And that was the basis of your choice?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And what did your brothers think about this choice for you to go to law school? You said you had younger brothers.
I have two younger brothers, and they've always been very proud of their big sister and very supportive.
Now, how unusual was it for you to be having the ambition to go to law school in 1960?
It was very unusual. When I got into law school, there were 5 women in the entire 3 years, and all 5 had been admitted with me. So I think there were 4 of us in the first year and 1 in the second year. And the dean of admissions said, we would never have let a woman take a man's place in law school, except that your law boards were so high we could not turn you down. So there were 2 of us that were actually in the top 10 people in the law apps, LSATs, that year, 2 of us females. So they resented us being there. We were taking a man's place in the class. We were only going to find a man and get married and stay home, which one of them did, but the rest of us have been lawyers.
Did your classmates share that thought that you weren't really going to be lawyers?
I think they thought we were all there to get a man.
And did you enjoy law school?
I did. I loved it.
What did you like about it?
It was very intellectually stimulating. It was something entirely different. It was almost like learning a new language. Lawyers have different ways of thinking about things and different languages that they use, derived from Latin, a lot of phrases that are not common in everyday English. And there was a lot of studying, there was a lot of work, there was a lot of back and forth with people, both professors and with fellow law students, arguing about, debating about the law and how it should be and how it is. It was fun.
Now, how was that for you, coming from a small women's Catholic college to find yourself in the debate, largely male-dominated, of Cornell Law School?
I felt right at home. Perhaps because I had 2 younger brothers, I don't know. But that was what I was looking for.
Were you intimidated by the small numbers and by the small numbers of women and by the much sort of larger school and sort of larger pond?
No, I don't think so. I remember one year, in my first year, the professors all decided to find out if I was prepared, and we had 4 classes right in a row, and every one of them called on me for those 4 classes, and I was prepared.
And what happened after that?
I guess I kept getting called on. It wasn't just Joanne Smith then. It wasn't just Joanne Smith, but they figured I had something to contribute to class, and they would call on me for discussion.
In a positive way, or was there was there skepticism in that approach to you?
No, it was a positive thing.
And how did that impact the receptivity of your male fellow students?
Well, there was always a competition between the men and the women as to where you were going to be in class and what your grades were going to be and where you were going to be ranked and so forth. We women did very well.
Now, were you involved in any activities in law school, law journal, that sort of thing?
I was on the law journal, and I was in the student government.
What did you do in the law journal?
I was the notes editor, which was right up my alley. It meant I had to read everything and make sure there were no typographical errors, make sure the citations were correct, make sure the Blue Book citations were right, and so that kind of detail work is something that I still excel at.
And how did it go over with male students for you to be in a position of authority and, in fact, controlling whether their note got published, I suppose?
I don't recall any adverse reactions at all.
Does that mean that they accepted you after that first reception?
Yes. I always felt quite at home. I felt quite well received.
And you said you had another extracurricular activity besides that law journal?
Student government.
Student government.
Right.
And what was your role there?
Well, of course, I was the woman, so I was the secretary.
And how was that with you? Did you mind that? Or?
No, not at all. I went back there a few years ago, and there was a picture of the student government, and there's also a picture of the board of the law review. And there I was, the one woman in both pictures. And as you go through the years and see later pictures, you see more women popping up. But back then it was very rare.
So how did you feel about kind of being the only woman in the room a lot of the time?
It didn't bother me. It didn't affect me. I liked everybody, got along well with people.
Were there women law professors?
No.
Any women staff that befriended you or vice versa?
No. There was one woman who had graduated from Cornell who was on the staff of the legal aid clinic. But she was there like 1 or 2 days a week for the legal aid. And that's it. I never had a class from her or anything.
What events do you remember most from law school? If any.
I remember the event of being called on. I remember our graduation in the law school courtyard. I remember the library with fondness. It was a great research library with the high arching ceilings. The law school was right on the edge of one of the gorges, and you could look out the windows and see the gorge while you're studying. I don't remember anything else particular.
Did you have any either term time or summer jobs while you were in law school?
When I was in college and law school, I worked for a bank in downtown Ithaca. Ithaca Savings Bank, I think it was.
Was it known there that you were a law student, even though they'd met you as somebody from a small women's college?
Yes.
And how did that go over?
Well, they said, our lawyer is so-and-so. And when you graduate from law school, I don't think he'll give you a job because women don't become lawyers. But other than that, I was happy there. It was a good experience.
So What was your reaction to that kind of news?
I felt that that was the attitude that people had at that time.
Did you have a game plan for what to do with your law degree if that was the attitude?
I thought I could possibly go out in private practice, or I thought I could get into a big law firm that wouldn't care whether I was a woman and could put me in a back room somewhere working on papers.
Where did you get the idea that those were the most likely possibilities?
Probably from talking to the professors.
Did anyone offer to help?
The dean of Cornell at the time was good friends with Mr. Revis, who was then the head of Revis and McGrath, which was a New York law firm, New York City law firm. And Mr. Revis was one of the big contributors. The dean asked him, would he please give me a summer job? So my last year, the year before my last year, I went to work in New York City for Revis and McGrath.
How did that go?
That was fun. It went very well, I thought. There were no women in the law firm, of course, and the other 3 or 4 summer people were all males. But they offered me a job at the end.
Now, why do you think that was?
Because I was capable, because I was at the top of my class, because I did good work. I hate to say all these nice things about myself.
Well, it's an invitation to trumpet a bit. Tell me about your success in law school.
Well, I did end up, I was really number 3 most of the time, but I ended up number 7. I kind of slacked off the last semester because I had my job. And I wrote a couple of law review articles.
What did you write about?
Well, one of them was a women's topic, and that is whether there was a tort called breach of promise to marry, and what happens to the engagement ring and so forth. That was a developing area of the law back then, and of course since then, no doubt on my recommendation, they have ruled that law is that there is no longer any such breach of promise to marry.
Now, did you come out with an opinion about whether that tort should be cognizable in court?
Oh yes, I did not think it should be. And my other article that I remember was about easements, which has come in somewhat useful because where I'm living now, the driveway is an easement. So I have all my old research ready to go in case anybody challenges my right to use the driveway.
Now, the article in which you came out against a cause of action for breach of promise to marry, did you show that to the folks who were considering hiring you?
No, I don't recall doing that.
Has that article ever sort of cropped up in your later life?
It actually did. When I came to Connecticut and took the Connecticut bar exam, that was one of the essay questions. So I think I aced that essay question.
So when did you take the bar exam?
I took the New York bar exam in 1963, and then I took the Connecticut bar exam in late 1966, passed it in 67.
And what was your experience then with that first bar exam, which I take it was the one that you took right after graduation?
Right. It was in Albany, New York, and it was probably the hottest day of the summer. It was 2 days, and there was no air conditioning. But obviously I passed and was sworn in a few months later and went to work in New York City with Revis and McGrath.
And how long did you stay there?
I stayed there from 63 till 66 and got married in 1965 to someone from New Haven. So we moved to New Haven in 66.
And you're swearing in. Were there other women there?
There were not very many other women, and the problem was I was already working in New York, and a bunch of us drove up together to Albany to be sworn in. And we got there late, and they had already called all the women's names first. So there were my mother and father hearing my name called and seeing nobody respond. If they had called us in alphabetical order, I would have been toward the tail end and it wouldn't have mattered. But they had to call the women first.
And how did you cope with that?
Well, they announced when I got there, so I got sworn in when I got there.
Well, tell me about that. You walk in and they announce sort of the missing woman is there?
Yes. Oh, here she is. And everybody turns their heads, so I go and get sworn in.
And did you get applause for being the missing woman who had shown up?
I don't recall, but I know my mother and father were greatly relieved. Can I tell you a story about my one of my job applications is my favorite story.
Please do.
I wanted to work in upstate New York because that's where I grew up. And so I applied to this firm in Rochester, New York, which at that point was the largest firm, quite small by today's standards, but the largest firm. And of course I had this great academic record and recommendations from the professors and so forth. And I went there one day and I interviewed in one day 40 people. Every partner, every associate, the mailroom clerk. And at the end of the day, the last interview was this elderly partner who had gotten out of law school in like 1935. He says, well, you come very well recommended and everybody thinks you're great and we'd like to hire you, but our clients would not stand for a woman lawyer. That was in 1963.
Did you respond?
I just said, I understand. I'm sorry. I didn't argue with him, but perhaps if I had argued with him, it would have changed my entire life.
Now, that was 1963. We were starting to hear from Betty Friedan and others. Were you defining yourself as a feminist at that point?
I was not, and I never did. I was not really conscious of the movement. I was absorbed in doing what I could with what I had.
Did you look around for other opportunities while you were in New York and before you moved to Connecticut?
Other law firms, you mean? No, I didn't. I also did not think I was going to be ever advanced to partner, so I hadn't committed myself to that as a future. And when I met my husband, he was also in a New York law firm, same building, different floor. We decided that we could not raise children there, and so we moved back to his home, Connecticut.
Now, in your job at this New York law firm, what were your responsibilities?
I did a lot of research, writing of memoranda and briefs.
And did you work for particular attorneys?
Well, there were only 10 or 15 attorneys, so it's kind of you worked for whoever needed you. It wasn't an assignment at all.
And what subject matter of law were you working on in that first job?
Mr. Revis had been corporation counsel for the city of New York, so we got a lot of municipal law type work.
Did you choose it or did it choose you?
Whatever I was assigned. We also did some estates, and I got into that a little bit, but not as much.
Were you anxious to try to develop a particular area of practice within that firm's clientele?
No.
And did you have any clients of your own while you were there?
No.
Did you get to court?
I got to court very rarely. We did not have a big litigation department, but I remember going to court in 1 month, twice, before the same judge, on 2 different sides of the same case. I lost both times.
Have you analyzed why that could have been?
I don't think he expected a female attorney, and I thought he was going to rule against me because I was female. I couldn't have been wrong both times because I was on the opposite side of the very same issue. I thought surely the second time I would prevail.
Tell me about that first time you walk into court. with a motion or a case to argue. What was that like for you?
It's obviously nerve-wracking. You're in a huge room with lots of male lawyers with all their files and folders, all speaking up and having something to say. I was very nervous.
And how did you handle it?
I thought I handled it fine. I had my little speech written down, what I wanted to say, what I had to say.
And how did you handle the experience of the rulings that you got that were clearly contradictory rulings?
It was a funny story to tell around the law firm.
Is that as far as it went?
Yes.
And was that your decision that you wouldn't follow up on it, or did the law firm decide that?
Neither one. I wasn't expecting anything. I knew I was a minority, female.
Did your law firm try to help you out with any of the judges, kind of mentor you or try to make you more acceptable to the bench?
No, we didn't go to court that often, really. So.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, you were working in New York City. What was it like to be a new and sort of rare young female attorney in New York City when you come from upstate New York, from a fairly small college town?
Well, I lived in Greenwich Village. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the subways. I enjoyed going to the concerts. I am not much of a shopper, but I found one nice little store that I could buy my clothes at. And I remember going in there once needing a whole wardrobe. It was right when I was just starting. And so I picked out lots of stuff and offered them a check. They said, "Oh, you'll have to have your father come and give us a check." And so I said, "Well, my father is, a couple hundred miles away in upstate New York, but I'm a lawyer, and I work for this Revis and McGrath law firm, and you can call them to verify." So ultimately, they accepted my check. Back then, women couldn't even get credit cards. I was in Connecticut before I could actually get a credit card. And I got a credit card from my bank, the bank where we were banking at. And I had to tell them that I did not need my husband's signature on this card. Fortunately, there were newly adopted laws coming out to prevent discrimination. And I had to tell them, and they gave me the card. And I still have it to this day.
And this is in 1966?
66, 67.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, while you were in this New York firm, did you have a game plan about progressing in that firm, or of what your next step in your career?
I did not. I know with my peers that came in at the same time, they were always talking about whether they would be made partner or whether they should be looking around. And I said, well, I don't even worry about that because I know I'm not going to be made partner because I'm a woman. So that was kind of my attitude, that I was there to work and do a job, and that's what I would do.
Did you have any client contact?
I had some client contact.
And was the prognostication of the other interviewer that the clients wouldn't like it, did that turn out to be true for the clients of the Revis firm?
It did not.
Tell me about that.
I remember going to visit with a real estate developer that we represented. And here I am, this little brand new lawyer, telling him about various aspects of his legal problem. And at the end he says, well, why don't you come to work for me? So I thought that was pretty nice. But I had only been at Revis and McGrath a short time, and I didn't feel like I could just up and leave. Then I remember another one, they sent me to do just a will execution to this fancy penthouse for somebody in the circus world. We also represented the circus, Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. And we got free tickets to the circus when they came to New York. And they accepted me, Didn't say, oh, you're a woman, I don't want you in here, I want a man to come to do this. So I think the older lawyers just had a mindset that the clients would not like women as lawyers, and it didn't turn out to be true.
And what was life like with your peers of other young lawyers in the firm?
We had a very good relationship, got along well together, did things together.
Now, did you have any, in that first job, did you have any cases that you felt had a significant impact?
I don't remember. I had my first published case was a case where we had, was it a famous actor? Was it Anthony Perkins or something like that? And it was in a divorce, and we had to try to stop him from leaving town somehow. I remember doing a brief on that, and there's a published opinion. And the judge, actually, as most judges do, thought of something I hadn't thought of. Well, this is a famous movie actor. If you don't stop him, he'll be all over the world and you'll never get him.
Now, your next, you said you then moved to New Haven, Connecticut. What was your next job as a lawyer?
When we moved to New Haven, my husband went with a law firm in New Haven. He had been with a New York law firm, and he got a job with a law firm in New Haven. And they knew I was a lawyer, and they told him straight out, your wife isn't going to get a job here. We don't hire women. Said we had one woman at this firm since it was founded, and that was during the war when there was a shortage of men. And when the war was over, we let her go. So I wasn't really planning to work. I was planning to stay home and just see what happened. And after 6 months, I was bored, so I went to volunteer at Legal Aid. And Legal Aid at that time had lots of funding. So after I was there a few months, they offered me a job.
And tell me about your career at Legal Aid.
When I first started at Legal Aid, it was an unpopular thing in New Haven. There had been many battles about whether it should be funded and so forth. And I had a couple of private lawyers say to me, no, you don't want to work for Legal Aid. They're the outsiders. They're discriminated against. They represent the poor people. I started there, and my first assignment was on a repossession case. And I just got interested in the consumer aspects of the law, and nobody else was interested in it. So there, finally, in 1967, was something that really piqued my interest and something I really wanted to concentrate on, and that was consumer law. So from then on, I was the consumer lawyer at New Haven Legal Assistance Association.
What kinds of cases did you bring at New Haven Legal Assistance?
At first, we did a lot of defense work. So I was doing a lot of defending of actions against consumers, like the repossession actions. We also did a lot of landlord-tenant defense. I really don't remember too much about it. I always worked part-time because then I started having my 3 children, so that I didn't really ever go to court. I worked from 9 to 1 and took my work home with me and did a lot of it there. So they got a full-time lawyer for part-time pay.
Yeah, tell me about part-time work. And this is sort of late 60s, early 70s that you were doing that?
Right.
What did you think about that as a way of continuing in the law?
I thought it was perfect for a woman. I could do work at the office. I could bring it home if I needed to. I could work on weekends if I needed to, but I would still be home with my children. So it was a good arrangement for me. And the fact that the salaries were low didn't matter too much because my husband worked in a big firm and he could support me in the style to which I had become accustomed, so to speak.
Now, there came a time when you started to work on some pretty big cases. Would you tell me about that?
Well, you probably remember more about them than I do, but we were in the United States Supreme Court 3 or 4 times while on cases that I worked on, and a couple of other times on cases that other people worked on. So that we had quite a run of civil rights litigation in the United States Supreme Court between, say, 68 and 73, 74.
What were those cases?
And I do not recall particularly. We had, there was Simmons versus West Haven Housing Authority. We lost that on a technicality. There was the body case was probably the first one that New Haven Legal Assistance had, and I helped write the brief on that. I didn't argue that.
Body versus Connecticut. A lot of people think that was just a case that sort of was part of the first shot of the revolution. Tell me about Body versus Connecticut.
I really don't remember anything about Body versus Connecticut.
This is about access to the courts?
Yes, it was whether a litigant had to pay a fee to file a divorce action. And our point was that here is a poor person who can't afford to pay the filing fee. The fee should be waived, just like it is in other types of cases. And the fact was you couldn't get a divorce without getting court approval. So if you couldn't pay the filing fee, you couldn't get a divorce, and your family life was just in disarray until things were organized. And that did convince the United States Supreme Court that the filing fee should be waived in those circumstances.
Now, did you work on the case right from the beginning?
Oh, yes, I did.
Yeah. What was the progress of the case like?
Once again, I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Did you go to court on it?
No. I don't think I even went to the argument in the Supreme Court.
So,
I just helped with the writing. I was the background person. I was the person reviewing the briefs and researching and contributing to the briefs.
and what were why you? Why were you in that role as sort of the person making sure the thing looked right, sounded right, was put together properly?
That's the kind of thing I enjoy. I enjoy writing, I enjoy researching. So that's how I got assigned that aspect of it.
And there were other Supreme Court cases while you were at New Haven Legal Assistance?
Yes, there were, and I don't remember all of them. I remember there was one called, I think it was Kokoska versus Belford. You can remind me. I think there were more, but I don't remember.
There was one about access to the bankruptcy courts, again, a filing fee case in the early 70s?
Was that Kokoska? I am sorry. I should have looked over my my
it-
earlier resume, which I did not.
How is it that you forget your U.S. Supreme Court cases?
Well, I can tell you about the ones in the last 10 years, but the last 25 years ago? I guess back then we were doing so many, it just seemed like this is what you do when you're a lawyer. You get cases in the United States Supreme Court.
And what was that like?
What?
The idea that going to the U.S. Supreme Court was a thing that your law office just did when you needed to.
That was the way we represented our clients. We went all out for them. We did things that private attorneys could never have afforded to do. No private attorney could have afforded to take this all the way up to the United States Supreme Court and through the various levels of the court. And that's really a balancing thing for society. I think there has to be that balancing for society. People who can't afford a lawyer have to have somebody who will go to bat for them.
Now, in New Haven, among merchants and those on the other side of your suits, there must have been some consternation about the fact that these folks were being funded to do what they could not have done on their own. What were your experiences with the reactions to this high-level litigation on behalf of poor people?
Well, some of the reactions were predictable. They would drop out of the case, get their client out of the case so they wouldn't have to spend so much money, or they would try to get the state in or some public official in to defend the case. But there was a great deal of resentment that poor people should indeed have a right to a lawyer and a right to go to court and a right to be heard.
So you were one of those, quote, legal aid lawyers, said in a certain tone of voice?
Exactly.
And, are there any stories that emerge from that status?
I can't recall. It was just being a double minority, being both a woman and a legal aid lawyer. You had two strikes against you, I guess, would be the thing to say.
And how were you regarded then around New Haven, in the legal community?
Legal aid people were always outsiders, always the enemy. I don't think I had many acquaintances in the private bar. We didn't have the camaraderie with the private bar that the private bar had with each other.
Yet your husband was working at one of the city's large law firms, and you were with what some people call those people. How
Right.
did that go?
I think actually his stature helped me because I could always say, well, my husband is at such and such, so that kind of increased the notch of respect just a little bit. And then after a while, the big firms got into vigorously supporting legal aid and fundraising and that sort of thing. So the stature grew. It was hard, but now it's practically an establishment.
Now, after you left legal aid, what did you do? And when was that?
I left legal aid, I think, in 1985, and I went into private practice. I went in with someone for about 6 months for an office, and my entire approach to the law was changed because there is this difference in the private bar as far as cooperation, camaraderie. At legal aid, if we wanted a postponement, we would never get it. Private bar, oh yeah, sure, help yourself. It was just a whole different attitude. And then I decided to start working out of my home. So I bought a computer and set up in a little former dressing room in the house. And essentially that's where I've been ever since.
And out of the home office dressing room, you brought a case that was a bombshell in Connecticut jurisprudence. You talk about that one, Dorr?
Yes, Connecticut versus Dorr. This was at a time when one could attach somebody's property before they even brought the lawsuit against them, before they even sued them, which had always struck me as terribly unfair, violation of due process. And I had always had in the back of my mind that I was going to challenge this practice, but I never did until a friend of mine, his parents got their property attached before they were sued. And he had a couple of other clients whose properties had just been attached, so he says, "You've got to do this, you've got to do this." So I said, okay, and I did it. I think I lost at the federal district court level and won at the Second Circuit level. And then the state of Connecticut appealed to the United States Supreme Court.
So you were challenging the constitutionality of the entire prejudgment attachment system in Connecticut.
That's correct.
Out of your sewing room.
Yes.
Now, that seemed like an unusual thing for you to do?
That's the way I practice law. One of the things when it got to the United States Supreme Court, when it was accepted for cert, I all of a sudden heard from somebody that I had known at legal aid that had long gone to a Washington law firm. And, oh, friendly, and how are you, and isn't this nice? And, we would like to take that case over for you and do it for you. we have all the resources, we this, that, and the other thing. And I said, well, it's really my case, and I know Connecticut law. I know I don't have the resources. Can we co-counsel? Oh, no. No, we would take it. We would take it entirely. We wouldn't want you involved at all. So I really didn't feel like I could do that to my client. There were 3 of them at the beginning, and 2 of them dropped out knowing what the expense was. And then I got a call from Public Citizen, which is in Washington, D.C., and Alan Morrison had just started a new litigation group for the very purpose of helping people without resources prepare and argue cases before the United States Supreme Court. And lucky me, I was the first one. And they did just such a wonderful job. We did probably 50 drafts of the brief. We did moot courts with oral arguments. And I remember the moot court distinctly, coming out of it in a sweat and thinking, oh my gosh, I'll never be able to do this. My mind is all jumbled with all the case law and everything. And Alan Morrison said to me, oh, the Supreme Court will be a piece of cake after that. And he was right.
Tell me about arguing before 9 justices, and first of all, what year?
This was, you asked me a hard one, 1991, January 7th, 1991. And the decision came out on January 6th, D-Day, 1991.
December?
June 6th.
June 6th.
June 6th.
Right.
What did I say?
Yeah,
I said the wrong day.
Right.
D-Day. At least that's what my opponent said it was when he lost. The argument was, the courtroom is very elegant, very well sounded. You know, the acoustics are great. The judges are not very much further away than you are from me. It's really almost like a conversation. They aren't way up high. They're just kind of surrounding you from one end to the other. Alan Morrison told me one thing: take 2 pieces of paper and that's all, because you don't want to stand up there at the microphone flipping pages. Left side, keywords for your argument. Right side, keywords for any answers to questions you think you're going to get. And that worked out beautifully. When my opponent got up, he hadn't been given the same thing, and flip, 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 flip. You could hear right into the microphone. He read his entire presentation, and I didn't. I was able to really converse with them. And it was, I was high for 2 or 3 days afterwards.
Did your family go to hear your argument?
Yes, yes. My husband and my 3 kids and my mother came up from Florida. And afterwards, she stopped in the hall and she straightened her shoulders. She said, I think that was the high point of my life. And I was so proud. The night before, we were all in a hotel together. And there was a movie on TV called, I think, Memphis Belle or something like that. It was about war pilots that do forays over Germany during the war. And some of them come back and some of them don't, but they all take a lot of flack. So I told my kids, I'm going to take a lot of flack tomorrow, but I'm coming back alive.
And did you take a lot of flack when you got back to Connecticut, having punched out the attachment statute?
Yes, I was not very popular, but I was really surprised at the number of lawyers who said to me, I always thought that statute was wrong. I never wanted to use it, but we had to because that's what you did for your clients. So it worked out very nicely, 9-0.
What of the 9-0, and what of the high points of your legal career been since the Dorr case?
Since the Dorr case, I have had a couple of more Supreme Court cases. One of them, I think, was 1996, called Heinz versus Jenkins. That one, I wrote the brief, I did not argue. And that established that lawyers were indeed subject to the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. And that, of course, created a a tidal wave in the way lawyers went about their collection business. There was another one that I wrote the brief for, which is escaping my mind, as usual. I mean, this is just all part of what I do. I really don't think of it as something extraordinary. It's something that one does when one is a lawyer.
You have been described in the New Haven legal community, in fact, probably statewide, as totally fearless. And you inspire some fear in your opponents. I don't know whether you knew that. Do you have any reaction to how you're perceived by what is still a largely male bar in Connecticut?
Well, I know one of them called me a pit bull at one time.
Was that a good thing?
It was a good thing because we were settling a case, and he said that in front of his client. So it impressed his client that he should settle with his pit bull. I feel that since I only represent poor clients, I only represent people that can't afford a lawyer, and that's conscious. You know, if I think somebody can afford a lawyer, I will send them off to somebody they can pay. There is nothing but me and my determination to go on. I don't have any status. I'm not with a big firm. You know, I don't have anything except my own determination and ability and desire to see justice done for the poor people.
Have you had folks that you watched that led you to think that was the way to run your legal career?
No. I actually got that out of the Bible. And I brought the quote with me from Isaiah 1:17. And this has been my motto. I remember saying it at one of the conferences that I led for the Bar Association. Make justice your aim. Redress the wronged. Hear the orphan's plea. Defend the widow. And of course, back then, the orphans and the widows had no rights. So that really has been my inspiration, doing the right thing. And I've been so fortunate to be in the right place at the right time to do it. One of the things that happened early in my career, at the end of '69, early '70s, was that a whole bunch of consumer protection statutes began to be enacted. And all throughout the early '70s, there were probably 40 federal statutes enacted that were consumer protection statutes and were fee-shifting statutes. So the intent of Congress was that people should take these cases for clients who couldn't pay, and then expect at the end of the case that the other side would have to pay the fees. And that is really what enabled my practice all these years, are those fee-shifting statutes.
Now, the quote from the Bible that you just told me about would send some people into matrimonial law and some into civil rights law. It sent you to a large extent into consumer law. Now, why is that?
I think it was coincidences. When I went to legal aid, nobody else was doing consumer law. Nobody else wanted to do consumer law. The consumer law protection laws began to be enacted. We started a consumer law section in the Connecticut Bar Association, which kind of raised everybody's consciousness about that. And people, for some reason, don't want to go into that area, and I don't know why. I guess maybe because it's so unique. There have never been more than 5 people in Connecticut doing consumer law at any given time. And I don't understand that, because it's so much fun. I take a client who cannot pay me, and they're always very nervous about that. You know, well, I can't pay you anything. And at the end of the case, I give them money, and I get paid too. And it's really a nice way to practice law.
Now, have you had any either helps or barriers that you faced along the way?
I think the National Consumer Law Center has probably been the biggest help. I began working with them very early on when I was still at Legal Aid, and they put out a set of books that are as comprehensive as any you will want. I have their books in my little linen closet, and that's really all I need, that and the internet to do my research. So I think that's probably been the most helpful thing. We now have annual conferences, consumer law conferences. We've been having them for the past maybe 14, 15 years. And we get to meet other consumer lawyers from across the country and exchange ideas and inspire each other to bigger and better things.
And barriers?
Barriers are still the people who don't believe that poor people should have rights, that poor people should have lawyers. And that still exists. It still exists.
Are you in court more these days than you were in other times of your career?
Yes, yes. Since I do a lot more court work now than I did before, so I am frequently in court. I didn't tell you about one of my accomplishments when you asked, and that is in October of 2002, I was awarded the Consumer Law Vern Countryman Award, which is the high point for any consumer lawyer in the country. This is the prize, prestigious award. And if you go into any search engine and you type in my name, you will find a description of the award and the praises and so forth that I got. But essentially, it's for excellence in the practice of consumer law, and I'm very proud of that.
Good. Let's stop here and just take a short break.
Wonderful.
I'm Beverly Hodgson, and we're resuming the interview of Joanne Faulkner. It's August 2nd, 2005. I wanted to ask you about this award that you mentioned, the Vern Countryman Award. Can you describe the significance of that award?
The award is named after a Harvard law professor who wrote consumer books and was early on in the consumer movement. And it is awarded by the National Consumer Law Center. They ask for nominees from consumer lawyers around the country. And it is something that is, everybody is surprised at the annual convention or annual conference who gets the award. It is for excellence in representing consumers. And my peers nominated me for it. I was very pleased.
It sounds as though you have a national reputation in consumer law. Have you been active in other contributions to the national consumer law scene?
Yes, National Consumer Law Center, as I said, holds conferences every year, and generally I'm a speaker at those conferences. In addition, they write the consumer manuals from A to Z, essentially, and I have written quite a few of those manuals, or pieces of the manuals, for them. In particular, I'm lately in charge of the Fair Credit Reporting Manual, and I contribute to the Fair Debt Collection Practices Manual, and I have contributed to the other manuals in the past: equal credit opportunity, credit discrimination, auto fraud, and so forth.
Now, you'd mentioned to me some work you'd done on a Federal Reserve Committee?
Yes, when I was at Legal Aid, the Federal Reserve was mandated to establish a Consumer Advisory Council. So it was the Federal Reserve Board Consumer Advisory Council. And they were looking for nominees also from all over the country. And I was nominated by Bruce Morrison at Legal Aid, and I was accepted. So I was one of a dozen people in the country. And at that point, I was the only voice for consumers. There was, bank representatives, credit union representatives, and so forth. And I was it for consumers.
And what did that work consist of on that council?
We met 4 times a year in Washington, and we talked about some of the issues that we thought the Federal Reserve ought to know about in consumer law. So there were topics at issue. And then there was an open session where you could mention anything you thought the Federal Reserve needed to know about the economy of the country and how things were being impacted by their truth in lending regulations or whatever other regulations they were in charge of.
And you were the voice of the consumer on this national panel?
Yes, I was.
And what years were those?
That was 1980 to 1982, 3 years, 80, 81, 82.
Did you feel as though you were able to make an impact?
I did. They seriously listened to what I had to say because I had experience that no one else at the table had. I've often said to myself, if only so-and-so, this judge or that senator or this Federal Reserve Board member, could sit in my chair and hear what I hear from the real people as to what their life is like at the bottom end, I think a lot of attitudes would change. So that's what I was trying to do, is give a picture of what life is like for the real person in the street.
Now, are you a member of bar associations or other lawyers groups besides the consumer law groups that you mentioned?
Connecticut Bar Association, of course, and the National Association of Consumer Advocates. That is based in Washington, D.C., and we founded it probably 10, 15 years ago to be a voice for consumer advocates. I was one of the founding members. There were about a dozen of us that decided we needed this organization, and now it's over 1,000 members, last I knew, and they also run conferences for consumer lawyers.
Are there other accomplishments or activities in your legal career that I haven't yet asked you about?
I've done a lot of appellate cases across the country, some fairly famous consumer protection cases around the country, different circuits, federal circuits. I do a lot of mentoring of younger consumer lawyers. Quite frequently consulted with either procedural problems or substantive problems, because I've had so much research built up over the years, and now it's all on my computer.
Are people surprised when they find that this national fount of consumer knowledge is operating out of a home office?
Yes. I always tell people I work out of my home in my jeans and slippers, and I like it that way. The only problem with that is if it's a blizzard outside, I don't have any excuse not to go to the office because I'm already there.
Have you been involved in community activities during your legal career?
Not so much that I can think of. I did recording for the blind for a while. I was reading law books for blind or dyslexic law students, and that was fun. And then I got too busy, so I had to give that up. I do a lot of church work. I'm prominent in my church as well. Lector and minister.
Now, do you think that there's anything about your having come to Connecticut that has made this career possible? Would your career have been the same had you stayed in New York, do you think?
It certainly wouldn't have. Connecticut is a small state with few lawyers compared to New York City, obviously. And I could probably do more and be more flexible in a small state or a small office than I could in in New York. I am sure I would never have gotten into consumer law. I don't think they've heard about consumer law yet in New York City. Although I do have some friends that do that in New York City.
Have there been any historical events that particularly had an impact on your career?
Well, I can't think of any except for the consumer laws that were enacted during the 70s and the civil rights cases that took place during the 70s, which made the practice of consumer law easier for me.
Now, I'm going to ask you some questions about your home life rather than your legal life. You've mentioned that you married another lawyer and came to New Haven. What has his attitude been toward your legal career over the years?
He's very supportive and very enthusiastic and very proud. He's in an entirely different area than I am in, so it's not as though we bring our work home, but he is a very, very bright and sensible lawyer and is very good to talk things over with. So that in my Connecticut versus Dorr Supreme Court case, I said, well, I've got to think of some aspect of this prejudgment attachment that is really, really important. And we were talking over the supper table, and he says, well, an attachment could put you in default on your mortgage. Well, that's something that I never would have thought of because I wasn't in that world. And that was mentioned by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court actually picked that up, and he gave it to me at the supper table.
Has it been awkward over the years for him working in a large and somewhat establishment firm to have this firebrand consumer law wife?
If it has, he hasn't said anything about it. One thing is that his firm never took any cases against my firm, against me, I guess my firm. And they could have. I think there were some ethical opinions when women started becoming lawyers that, in fact, there wouldn't be any conflict unless it was him against me. But they just, I think, took the high road and decided they were not going to take any cases where I was involved.
And tell me about your children.
The children, I had, the first two were girls, and they both said firmly, I am never going to be a lawyer. And daughter number 2 is now a lawyer with, with a big firm out in Los Angeles. And she has 2 little children, and she also does the so-called part-time work. But part-time work, I think, is 40 hours a week. I don't know how she manages, but she does. The other daughter is in upstate New York, and she is a history professor at State University of New York, Geneseo. And she's married to a history professor at Syracuse. And they have 1 child, new baby daughter. Then my son, who came a few years later, is a graduate of Northeastern in computer science, and he's working at the Yale computer science department. So he's the only one that's close at home.
What did your children think of your legal career when there were Supreme Court briefs being prepared in the House and that sort of thing?
I don't think they thought anything of it. That's what Mommy does. That's the way it was. I remember, though, when my youngest, the boy, was always around when I was at home and on the phone, and he learned to spell his last name real fast because every time I said my name on the phone, I would spell it out because people had trouble spelling it. So he was learning, lurking around there, he was learning to spell his last name listening to Mom.
What impact did having children have on your legal career?
I took 3 months off for each one of them and went right back into the fray.
And do you think that your being a lawyer had an impact on your family life in general?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just the job that I did. Just like my husband being a lawyer wouldn't have any impact on the family life in general. That's what you do.
And did having children have an impact on the intensity of your legal career?
Well, it didn't, because I was always part-time. Once I came to Connecticut, I was always part-time, so that sort of part-time, half mommy, half lawyer status continued throughout.
Many women lawyers have said that being mommy and lawyer means that you get to be guilty all of the time. Do you think, how did you work out that sort of conflict of time and whereabouts?
Again, my husband was very supportive. He pitches in, he has always pitched in, he's always done his share or more than his share. So I had the right husband.
Did you know that from the beginning?
I didn't, no. It worked out nicely, though.
Now,
I should tell you that his family are lawyers. His father was a lawyer. His brother is a lawyer. His cousin is a lawyer. His cousin's son is a lawyer. Two of his brother's sons are lawyers. They're all male, though, aren't they? And when we got married, his brother, who's a lawyer, gave a toast and said, "We didn't need another lawyer in the family. We needed a plumber."
Were the in-laws expecting you to end your legal career once you moved to New Haven and he had his partnership niche at a large firm?
If they were, they never said so.
Has spending your career as a lawyer met the expectations that you had when you set out to go to law school?
Largely, yes. I think it's a good career. It's something where you can use your brain all the time, where you're learning all the time. There is never something you already know in the law. You've always got to research, get yourself up to date, new cases, and it keeps you in good mental form. It keeps you active. I guess one of the biggest disappointments about being a lawyer is, in recent years, people have been so combative. Lawyers were collegial, they were cooperative, they did realize that they were the barrier between the two clients and had to work things out. And I remember in law school they used to say, if you have the facts on your side, you pound the facts, and if you have the law on your side, you pound the law, and if you have neither on your side, you pound the table. But nowadays, if you have neither on your side, you pound opposing counsel. Now maybe that's because I'm a minority, maybe it's because I'm vulnerable, because I represent poor people, but the combative nature of some of the lawyers I run into is disappointing.
Do you get that more from out-of-towners than from folks who know you around Connecticut legal circles?
I think that's fair to say, yes.
What have the rewards of your career been?
Obviously, there's a great deal of personal satisfaction in being able to help someone who's down get back on their feet, in being able to save them money, being able to save them from being cheated, being able to give them back money at the end of the day, being able to and being involved in changing the law so that it's more favorable to the low-income consumer. I think those are the rewards, and I have to say, because of fee-shifting statutes, it's also monetarily rewarding. But you know, when I was at Legal Aid, I don't think I ever made more than $15,000 a year, so it's never been the money.
If you had a chance to live life over again, would you become an attorney?
I think probably.
And is there advice that you would give to women entering the legal profession, the kind of women that you describe yourself as having been, no one particularly urging you to do so? Is there any advice you would give?
Well, nothing but you can do it. You can do it. And I think it's become more and more true now as there are more women entering law school and graduating law school and being in law firms, that it's just the normal thing that women do nowadays.
What was the impact of your career as a lawyer on your life as a whole?
It absorbed quite a bit of my life. I probably would have done more hobby type things, maybe cultural type things, if I hadn't been so concentrated on getting my briefs out, getting my cases done, and so forth.
Worth it?
Yes, it's been very interesting, very interesting.
How long do you intend to continue to practice?
Well, they asked me that at the Vern Countryman Award, and I said, one of my idols is Mother Teresa. I'm going on as long as I can. I know there are people waiting for me to quit. I've had several people say, when are you going to retire?
How do you view the role of lawyers in society?
Well, I think that lawyers are meant to keep society in an orderly, working condition. Laws are the bedrock of society, and if we obey the laws, things work right and things work normally. I found a quote from Abraham Lincoln, which I think tells what a lawyer should be. And he says, persuade your neighbors to compromise whenever you can. Point out to them how the nominal winner is often the real loser in fees, expenses, and waste of time. As a peacemaker, the lawyer has a superior opportunity of being a good person.
Do you think women have added anything to the development of the legal profession?
Oh yes, definitely. I think women have a more personal attitude, less indifferent to the clients and to their situation. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but it's just more of a person-to-person thing than an impartial professional. You can relate better. I think women relate better to the individual clients.
Would you urge young women to go into the practice of law today?
I think so. I think it's a good career. It's been good to me.
Now, technology, how has that affected your practice?
It has enabled my practice. I was a poor typer, but as long as you have a computer with a spell checker that will correct your errors as you go along, you can produce a lot of good writing. I find that I can do most of my research nowadays outside of the consumer law books on the internet. It's very easy to do background research on businesses, entities that you're suing on the internet. I think it's been a great boon to me, particularly.
Is the practice of law different now than it was when you started back in the 60s?
Well, of course, there is now a whole new area of consumer law that wasn't there before. There are more women in the profession. There is a less collegial atmosphere among lawyers. I think a lot more cases are being brought in federal court because of the federal laws as well. A lot of changes in the legal ability to bring class actions and so forth.
Are there changes that you wish could be made to the legal profession or the practice of law in Connecticut?
I think probably more, keep using the word collegiality, but more training in how to get along with other lawyers, how a lawyer should react with other lawyers, and in particular, ethics. I think the ethics has gone by the wayside a lot, not entirely, but I think there seems to be a lot more ethical problems, or else they're being reported more. I don't know which. But there should be more attention paid to the ethics canons of the profession, I think.
It's interesting that you think that there are more ethical problems. Do you have a sense of why that might be, other than perhaps the greater reporting of the problems that do exist?
People used to go to law school because it was an idealistic thing to do. It was an idealistic profession. I think there are people in it for the money, and they view their clients' money as their own. I think that probably the money problems are the biggest ones, where they think they can just dip into their clients' money and so forth. Or they think they have to drive an expensive car because they're a lawyer and they have to put out an image. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's sad.
Do you think that women lawyers now no longer have to worry about the kinds of experiences you described, going to court early on with a judge who could rule against you in both directions on the same case, same issue?
I would hope so. I hope it's changed by now.
And are there things about your career or your life in the law that I haven't asked you about that I should have?
Well, I brought some quotes with me.
These are quotes that you live by or that inform your legal life?
Yeah. One is Dr. Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. And one of the things he says is, I refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. And that's one of my ideals. If you lose a case, you can't think the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. You have to think, well, I've got to do it a little bit better the next time. That's all. And in his final sermon at the Ebenezer Baptist Church the day before he was assassinated, Dr. King said, this is his drum major speech, which I like. If you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. Say that I was a drum major for righteousness. And all the other shallow things will not matter. I just want to leave a committed life behind.
Can't think of a better way to end this interview. Thank you.
Thank you.